A German fighter pilot pointed his guns at a crippled U.S. bomber full of dying men. And then he made a choice no one expected. If you think you know war, watch until the end. The mission that should have killed them. At 8:07 a.m. on December 20th, 1943, 10 young Americans in a B-17 bomber named Ye Olde Pub crossed into German airspace, straight into the kind of mission most crews didn't come back from. Their target, a heavily defended aircraft factory in Bremen, Germany. Their unit, the 379th Bomb Group, flying out of England. Their pilot, Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown, 21 years old, West Virginia farm kid on his first combat mission. The sky around them was painfully bright and brutally cold. Frost crept across the inside of the windows. Oxygen masks hissed softly. 4 engines droned at full power as the bomber formation pushed deeper into enemy territory. On paper, this was just another raid. In reality, everyone on board knew the odds. Crews had a saying, complete 25 missions, go home alive. The problem was simple. Almost no one made it to 25. Charlie wrapped his gloved fingers around the yoke and glanced at his co-pilot, Spencer Luke. Neither of them said what they were thinking, but it was the same thought. Don't let my first mission be my last. Ahead, black bursts began to bloom in the sky. Flak. The German anti-aircraft guns opened up, throwing exploding steel into the bomber stream. Each black puff was a shell detonating at altitude, spraying shrapnel at 2,000 meters per second. The intercom crackled with clipped voices. Flak, 11 o'clock low. More at 1 o'clock. Hold formation, stay tight. The bomber shuddered as the first shock waves hit. Charlie kept Ye Olde Pub on course, fighting every instinct that told him to duck, flinch, turn away. Bombers that broke formation died alone. Everyone knew that. The bombardier lay prone in the nose, hands on his controls, eye glued to the bomb sight. Steady, steady. More flak. A burst tore into the right wing. Metal screamed. Instruments flickered. Bomb bay doors open. Wind roared through the fuselage as the internal doors cranked wide. Beneath the bomber, Bremen's industrial district crept into view. 3, 2, 1. Bombs away. The aircraft lurched as the bomb load dropped free. The crew felt the sudden lightness, a tiny relief. The worst should have been over. But over Germany in 1943, the worst never ended with the bomb run. It started after, because flak was only the first layer of defense. The second layer had just taken off from airfields below. German fighters. And Ye Olde Pub was about to meet them. A flying coffin over Germany. The bomber formation turned for home, but Ye Olde Pub was in trouble. Flak had already chewed into her wings and fuselage. One engine sputtered. Sections of aluminum skin were peeled back like the lid of a tin can. The tail gunner's voice came over the intercom, thin and strained. "Tail to cockpit, I've got holes big enough to crawl through back here." Before Charlie could answer, they saw them. Dark specks on the horizon, growing fast. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s, sleek, fast, built for one thing, killing bombers. "Fighters, 3 o'clock high," someone shouted. They came in waves. Guns flared, tracers streaked across the sky like glowing needles. The first pass slammed into Ye Olde Pub with horrifying violence. Bullets punched through the nose, the cockpit, the wings. Glass exploded inwards. Metal shrieked. Oxygen lines burst. A shell ripped through the tail section, shredding control cables and armor. The tail gunner was hit. The top turret jammed. The radio station was torn open. Inside, the bomber became a storm of shrapnel, wind, and blood. Charlie's headset filled with half screams, cut-off words, static. "Top turret out. Oxygen's gone in the nose. Engine 3's hit. A second pass hit even harder. The formation ahead pulled away. The other B-17 stayed together, tight, disciplined, essential for mutual defense. Ye Olde Pub couldn't keep up. She fell behind. In the space of a few minutes, Charlie's bomber went from part of the herd to the slowest, weakest animal on the plane. Alone, limping, bleeding. The engines coughed and snarled, but somehow kept turning. The right wing dripped fuel. One propeller spun slower than the rest, wobbling dangerously. The navigator shouted, "We're losing altitude, and the others are leaving us." Everyone understood what that meant. A lone bomber was a gift to every German fighter in the sky. Charlie Brown clenched his jaw. He could bail out, give the order, let his men jump and hope for a German POW camp instead of a coffin. But some of them were too badly hurt to move. One had passed out. Another lay in a pool of blood and freezing oxygen. He gripped the controls harder. "Not yet," he muttered. "We're not dying yet." The B-17 staggered westward, away from Bremen, over snow-dusted fields and dark forests. Below, Germany rolled by. Above, the sky looked empty. For a moment, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, the fighters had turned back to find easier kills. Then the flight engineer shouted, "Ship at 6 o'clock, closing fast!" Another fighter, another predator. Except this time, it wasn't part of a swarm. It was alone, and so were they. The Hunter. A few miles behind and below, Franz Stigler eased the throttle forward on his Messerschmitt Bf-109. He already had one bomber kill that day. He needed one more to earn the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest combat decoration. He'd flown countless missions. He'd seen friends die, aircraft burn, parachutes fail. He was a professional, and professionals did their job. His job today was simple. Find stragglers, destroy them. Franz spotted smoke on the horizon and banked toward it. As he closed the distance, the shape resolved. A lone B-17. Badly damaged. No escort. Drifting like a wounded animal. An easy target. He climbed slightly, positioning his fighter behind and above, exactly where a bomber's guns were weakest. Training took over. Calm, efficient. No anger, no hate, just procedure. But as he slid closer, ready to fire, something made him pause. From this range, he could see details. Not just the plane, the damage. The tail was shredded. The gun position was ripped open, glass gone, metal twisted. The rear gun sagged, unmanned. The left horizontal stabilizer looked like someone had taken a bite out of it. He inched closer, ignoring every instinct that told him to stay in a firing position. Along the fuselage, holes gaped wide. Through one, he saw a man inside pressing a bandage onto another crewman's chest. The nose cone was shattered, the bombardier's position blown open to the air. The cockpit windows were broken, the frame jagged with glass. Franz pulled up alongside the B-17, close enough now to see faces. They were pale, bloody, exhausted. These were not the defiant, well-defended bomber crews he was used to. These men weren't fighting. They were hanging on. Franz's thumb rested on the trigger. One squeeze, one burst, one more victory. Instead, another memory surfaced. The voice of his pre-war instructor, Gustav Rodel, back in the early days. "You are a pilot first, a fighter second. If I ever see you shoot a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself. We are not butchers." Franz looked again at the wrecked bomber. This wasn't a combat engagement anymore. It would be an execution. He took his thumb off the trigger. In that instant, he did something far more dangerous than attacking the enemy. He disobeyed the war. The enemy at the window. Inside Ye Olde Pub, the crew watched the German fighter slide up alongside them just off their wingtip. Nobody moved. Some couldn't. Some wouldn't. They'd survived flak, fighters, and a dying airplane. This had to be the end. Charlie Brown, hands still on the controls, turned his head and stared through the cracked cockpit glass. He could see the German pilot clearly. Helmet, goggles, scarf. A face lined with exhaustion and streaked with oil and sweat. The Messerschmitt's guns were pointed straight at them. But they didn't fire. The German raised one hand. Charlie blinked. Was his mind finally breaking? The Luftwaffe pilot was gesturing. He pointed ahead, then down, then toward the west, a kind of silent map drawn in the air. The navigator realized it first. He's showing us a course. He's guiding us away from the coast defenses. The crew didn't believe it. They couldn't. A few minutes earlier, every German pilot in the sky had been trying to kill them. Why would this one be different? But the fighter stayed with them. Wingtip to wingtip. A silent escort. Every time Charlie drifted off course, the Messerschmitt nudged back into view, pointing him in the right direction with small, deliberate movements. The radio operator, bleeding from a head wound, whispered, "This is insane." Charlie didn't answer. He just flew. Below them, German anti-aircraft batteries scanned the sky. An American bomber hugging the deck would normally draw fire instantly. But here it was, flying in formation with a German fighter. From the ground, it probably looked like a victory escort, a German pilot herding crippled prey home. Franz knew that was the only thing keeping the flak guns quiet. He also knew that if anyone on the ground realized what he was really doing, he could be court-martialed or shot. As they neared the coastline, the North Sea appeared, gray, cold, merciless. Franz checked his fuel gauge. Running low. He couldn't go much farther. He pulled closer to the B-17 one last time. The two pilots locked eyes. Franz lifted his hand in a crisp salute. Charlie hesitated, then saluted back. A broken, bloody, stunned young American honoring the man who should have killed him. Then Franz Stigler rolled his fighter away, banking hard back toward Germany. No radio calls, no report filed, no victory claimed. Just a choice made in the silence between two cockpits. Ye Olde Pub flew on alone. Every shudder of the airframe, every cough of the engines was a reminder. They were only alive because an enemy had refused to pull the trigger. Now they still had to cross the North Sea, in a half-destroyed bomber, with dwindling fuel and wounded men. Survival was not guaranteed. But for the first time that day, it was possible. Crossing the Gray Sea. The North Sea beneath them wasn't water. It was a grave waiting to happen. Cold, endless, indifferent. Charlie coaxed Ye Olde Pub forward, nursing each engine as if he could will them to keep turning. His hands were stiff, his vision blurred at the edges from exhaustion and loss of oxygen. In the fuselage, the crew moved as best they could. The radio operator slapped at his damaged equipment until he coaxed a weak signal out of it. "Mayday! Mayday! Heavy battle damage! Requesting emergency landing! Any station, respond!" Static. Then, faintly, "Aircraft calling? Repeat call sign?" He nearly cried with relief. "This is B-17, Ye Olde Pub, returning from Bremen. We are barely airborne." The reply came more clearly. "Pub, this is Control. We have you. Diverting you to the nearest available field. Do you have wounded?" The radio operator looked around at the shredded interior, at the men slumped against bulkheads, at the blood frozen into dark patches. He almost laughed. "Yeah," he said under his breath, "we've got wounded." To the radio, he answered, "Affirmative, multiple." As the English coastline finally emerged through the haze, the bomber shuddered again. Engine 3 coughed, then died. The plane yawed violently. Charlie fought it, wrestling the yoke with what little strength he had left. "Hold together," he muttered to the airframe, "just a little longer." The landing field came into view, a strip of concrete and tarmac that looked impossibly small from their current angle. The runway controller's voice came over the radio. "Pub, you are cleared straight in. Crash crews are standing by. You are priority." There was no time for a perfect approach, no chance at a textbook landing. Charlie lined her up as best he could. The bomber hit the runway hard, bounced, then slammed down again. A tire blew, metal shrieked, one wing dipped dangerously close to the ground. For a heart-stopping moment, it looked like they would roll and break apart. Then the remaining brakes bit. The landing gear held. The B-17 skidded, twisted slightly, and finally groaned to a stop. Silence. Then, we made it." Some laughed, some sobbed, some simply sat in shock as medics and ground crew swarmed the aircraft. One mechanic stared at the wrecked tail and muttered, "I don't know how this bird stayed in the air." Charlie, too exhausted to stand, was helped out of the cockpit. When a debriefing officer asked him what happened up there, he mentioned flak, fighters, damage, and then, almost as an afterthought, he said, "There was a German pilot. He had us cold. He didn't shoot. He flew beside us, guided us out, let us go." The officer stared at him. "You're saying the enemy spared you?" "Yes, sir." The officer's expression hardened. "I'd leave that part out of the written report. Nobody's going to believe it, and it'll just raise questions command doesn't want to answer." Charlie looked at him, stunned. He realized something that would haunt him for years. War had room in its paperwork for destruction, loss, and heroism. It had no place for mercy from the enemy. So, officially, the story ended with a damaged bomber limping home. Unofficially, it didn't end at all. It just went quiet. For almost half a century. 2 men, 2 lives, 1 secret. After the war, Charlie Brown went home. He left the cockpit of a B-17 and eventually joined the U.S. State Department. He worked as a diplomat, raised a family, and tried to build a life that didn't involve flak bursts and screaming engines. But some nights, when the house was quiet and his mind wandered, he saw the same image. A German fighter, flying so close he could see the pilot's eyes. A hand raised in salute, and an entire crew's life hanging on a choice made by someone trained to kill them. Charlie rarely spoke of it. People liked clear stories. Good guys and bad guys, heroes and villains. This story didn't fit in neat categories. On the other side of the world, Franz Stigler was fighting his own private war. The war had taken his brother, many friends, and the only life he'd known. The Luftwaffe was no longer a badge of honor. It was a symbol of a regime the world had learned to hate. Franz immigrated to Canada, started over as an immigrant with skills that didn't easily translate to peacetime. He worked hard jobs, logged long hours, bit his tongue when people talked about the Germans like they were one thing. Eventually, he found his way back into aviation, flying bush planes, working in civil aviation, fixing aircraft instead of shooting them down. But the memory stayed. Not of the dozens of bombers he'd damaged or destroyed. Not of the times he'd walked away from smoking wrecks. What stayed was that battered B-17. Those faces at the windows. That salute. He didn't tell the story. Not because he was ashamed. Because he wasn't sure anyone would understand. Mercy in that war was a dangerous thing to admit. For years, both men aged. Wrinkles deepened, hair thinned, medals gathered dust in drawers. History books were written about great battles, famous generals, decisive campaigns. but not about the day when a man looked at an enemy and saw not a target, but a human being. It seemed like the moment would die with them, until, one day, Charlie decided it couldn't. Not yet. The search. By the late 1980s, Charlie Brown had retired. Retirement gave him something he never had before: time. Time to think. Time to remember. Time to wonder. He thought of his crew. Some had passed away. Some had families of their own. Some still sent him Christmas cards. And always, behind every memory of that mission over Bremen was the same unanswered question. Who was he? The German pilot. The man who had them at gunpoint and chose not to fire. Had he survived the war? Was he alive somewhere? Did he remember them at all? One evening, sitting at his desk surrounded by old photographs and mission logs, Charlie made a decision. He took out a piece of paper and began to write. He addressed the letter to a German Veterans Association, former Luftwaffe pilots. In it, he laid out the date, the location, the details. A lone B-17 badly damaged over Bremen on December 20th, 1943. A German fighter that escorted them instead of killing them. He ended with a simple request. If the pilot who did this is still alive, I would very much like to meet him. He mailed the letter and waited. Weeks passed. Nothing. Then months. Still nothing. Life went on, but every day the unanswered question sat there, quiet, patient. Then, almost a year later, a letter arrived. It was from a man tied to the German pilot community. He wrote, "I believe I know the man you are looking for. His name is Franz Stigler. He lives in Canada." Charlie sat down slowly. The name meant nothing to him, but the possibility? That meant everything. He found a phone number, stared at it for a long moment, then dialed. The call. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice answered, older, accented, cautious. Hello? Charlie took a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for 47 years. Mr. Stigler, my name is Charlie Brown. Silence. Then, Brown? You flew a B-17? Charlie's heart hammered. Yes, over Bremen, December 20th, 1943. Our plane was badly hit. A German fighter came up on us. He didn't shoot. The line went very quiet. After a moment, the voice on the other end exhaled. Yes, Franz said softly. I know that bomber. Charlie swallowed. I've been wanting to thank you for almost 50 years. Franz's answer was simple. I always wondered if you made it home. They spoke for over an hour. The details matched. The damage, the altitude, the route, the salute. 2 memories from opposite sides of the same day finally snapping into alignment. At one point, Charlie asked the question that had hung over his life. Why didn't you kill us? Franz paused. When he spoke, his voice carried both weight and relief. You were no longer my enemy. You were men who could not fight. If I had shot you, it would have been murder. Charlie didn't speak for a while after that. Because how do you respond to the man who chose your life over his medal? At the end of the call, Franz said, We must meet. Charlie agreed. Not out of politeness, out of a sense that something left unfinished in the sky in 1943 might finally be brought gently back to Earth. The meeting. When they finally met in person in 1990, it was in a quiet gathering room filled with veterans, family members, and curious onlookers. Charlie walked in first. He was older now, Gray-haired, slower, with the careful movements of someone who had lived a full life and felt every mile of it. Across the room, Franz stood up. Charlie recognized him instantly. Not the face of the enemy, the face in the cockpit window, the man who had saluted him over Germany. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Charlie stepped forward and held out his hand. Franz ignored it. He pulled Charlie into a hug instead. People clapped. Some wiped their eyes. A reporter asked Charlie later what that moment felt like. He answered, "It felt like finally getting to thank the man who gave me the rest of my life." From that day on, the two men were almost inseparable. They attended air shows together, gave talks, told their stories side by side. German ace and American bomber pilot, no longer enemies, now almost like brothers. Franz said in one interview, "I lost many things in the war. That day, I gained a brother." Charlie replied, "When my grandchildren ask me what courage looks like, I don't tell them about the day we dropped bombs. I tell them about the day a German pilot chose not to pull the trigger." Their story spread slowly at first. A local paper, a veterans newsletter, then national media. People were stunned. Many had never heard a story like it. Not about destruction, but about restraint. Not about victory, but about mercy. Legacy. Franz Stigler died in March 2008 in Canada. Charlie Brown died just a few months later in November of the same year. Some say it was coincidence. Others say you can only stretch a bond like that so far before it pulls both ends into the same silence. At Franz's funeral, a friend read a line Franz had once said about that day. "I could have shot them down, but I would have had to live the rest of my life knowing I had murdered those men. I decided I did not want to live with that." At Charlie's memorial, one of his former crewmen said, "We talk a lot about heroes with guns. I'm alive because one man chose not to fire his." Today, their story is taught in military academies, ethics classes, leadership courses. Not as a piece of trivia, as a case study. A reminder that war tests more than courage. It tests conscience. Cadets hear about medals, tactics, strategies. Then they hear about a day in December 1943 when a German fighter ace flew up behind a crippled American bomber and chose not to kill. Every time a soldier hesitates and thinks, "What is the right thing here, not just the ordered thing?" a small part of that moment lives on. The war produced countless acts of violence, but this story survived because it was something rarer. An act of humanity in a place designed to erase it. If you had been in that cockpit, on either side, what would you have done? That's the question their story leaves behind. And that's why, decades later, two names still matter. Charlie Brown, Franz Stigler. Enemies by uniform, brothers by choice.